Howdy folks, this is Checkers here today to talk a bit about Bethesda's E3 presentation of 2017, kind of a look at the aftermath, and to be honest, we are going to talk much more about what did not happen than what did. They did announce some new games, but these are not games that I particularly am concerned about. I am more focused on their open world RPGs. So, as I said, we'll be talking more about what they didn't say than what they did say. They also did talk about some other things that they are doing within the Skyrim and Fallout 4 categories with the Creation Kit and Fallout 4 VR, but I'm going to reserve my judgment. One, I don't have a VR headset, so I can't really talk about Fallout 4 VR. And as for the Creation Club, I think we will have to see how that rolls out. We just don't have quite enough information, although it does certainly seem to be something we've seen before. Now, on to the very meat of things. The things we didn't hear. Well, we didn't hear anything about the Elder Scrolls series, the next installment, Elder Scrolls 6, and we did not hear anything about Fallout 5, and honestly, I didn't expect to hear about either one. I really truly believe those are fairly far off in the future. I made a prediction about that last year at E3 2016. I'll put a card up in the upper right-hand corner if you want to check that out. It's basically saying, the title is something like, will the Elder Scrolls 6 be out in 2027? And I see nothing in this year that would make me change that. That is the farthest out, I think. Perhaps in the window of time, I think nearest would be, if we were lucky, 2021 to 2024, but we'll get into that. Because mainly, we found out last year that Bethesda is working on 2 new open-world RPGs, at least as big as or bigger than anything they have done in the past. And that's really pretty big. So we have 2 whole new, entirely new IPs, intellectual properties, 2 new open-world RPGs, although I don't know actually that they've said that for sure, but that is our assumption. And we need to see both of those before we will hear about the Elder Scrolls 6 or Fallout 5. Part of that is from things that they've said last year. Part of that is just looking at what they are doing. They have truly zeroed in on not wanting to talk about things that are not going to release within the calendar year. Not just 12 months from the time that they're talking, but within that calendar year. So we know there are no new Bethesda open world RPGs coming in 2017. That means that the next closest one that could possibly release would be in November of 2018, because we also know that November is their time slot. That is their favorite, that is their favored time period. 11/11, specifically November 11th, and the time period around that. With every major release, Dishonored 2, some of the other titles they announced at E3 2017's presentation, everything hovers around that early November, late October time period. So it will be E3 2018, I think, before we even have the possibility of hearing about one of these new RPGs. It would be at earliest November of 2018 before we would see one in our own hands, and that's only if we're really lucky. And I don't say this to be unkind to Bethesda or to make you feel bad or to make you concerned. It's just the way that they work. My first Elder Scrolls was 23 years ago in 1994, the Elder Scrolls 1 Arena. And after that, it took 2 years before they released the Elder Scrolls 2 Daggerfall. It took 6 years before Morrowind released in 2002. It took another 4 years for Oblivion to release after that in 2006. And it took 5 years after that before we saw Skyrim release. And if we just stuck to that kind of time period, that tempo, it would be reasonable to expect the Elder Scrolls 6 as the next game and within the near future, but we know that we have to see the other two RPGs first, not just because I say so, but because they say so. So that means we are going to need to see one of these two new RPGs. Well, actually, we're going to need to see both, but we need to see one before we can even begin to establish any kind of speculative time frame with any kind of accuracy. When we do that, we will begin to know, okay, how much time are they going to take between things? Because at this point, it has already been 2 years since they announced Fallout 4, and it has been 6 years since Skyrim. So if they make 2018, that would be 3 years between games. It would be 2021 before we saw the second RPG, and 2024 before we saw the Elder Scrolls 6. And yes, I do know that they've hired more people, but it doesn't appear that they've hired that many more. They are not EA, they are not Activision, they are not a developer cast of thousands crunching out games at the fastest tempo they possibly can. And quite honestly, the games that they're developing are considerably more complex. As I talked about in the pre-E3 speculation video, we can throw an item on the ground here and have a fair degree of trust that it will be here when we get back. And even if it isn't, we also can have a fair degree of trust that it was probably one of the local settlers here that picked it up, or maybe a raider. But it didn't just get wiped because the game didn't want to deal with having all those items. So Bethesda's RPGs are keeping track of a lot of information. They have their day-night cycle. They have people going to and from doing things. They have a lot going on. So there is a lot of work going on. They're not just sitting in their office eating bonbons and laughing at the dismay of gamers who aren't playing their games. They want you to play their games. They want to build those games. But it's going to take time, and we have to give them that time if we want to enjoy the games that we've come to enjoy. Otherwise, if we just want soulless games that are crunched out as if they were stamped by a rubber stamp, well, you know, then we could try and nudge them into that direction. But honestly, I'd prefer not to. So we know we need to see these two new RPGs. When we see one, we will begin to have an idea of where we will go from there. And, you know, they're going to run into unexpected problems as they do things. Kind of like I didn't realize I was going to run out of power just doing this. So we'll tie in another generator. Oh, curious. Anyway, so we see one RPG. We see one bit of information. We will have some light at the end of the tunnel. We see another, and we will be even further along, but we still will have a ways to go. We still have to get from those two RPGs over to where we can see the Elder Scrolls 6 or Fallout 5. And again, that is going to take work, and we don't know what exactly it's going to take. We know Todd Howard is concerned about some sort of technology. What technology exactly is it that he's concerned for? I don't actually know. But we could turn the corner and find out that, oh, you know what? It's not quite as simple as it was. This is going to take a bit longer than we thought. And I'm not going to bother connecting them all. It's just sort of my, hopefully, visual aid here, that it's going to take time. And I'm okay with that taking time. I love these games. Honestly, I've been spending a lot of time recently playing Daggerfall, and after getting over my eyes being sliced up by the graphics, I've been having a really good time. and remembering how deep these older games were. Daggerfall is probably the most complex of the Elder Scrolls games, which makes it probably the most complex of Bethesda's RPGs. But no matter whether it's Daggerfall or Fallout 4, these are still incredibly complex systems intermingling to create a world where we can go anywhere, do anything. You can look at the mountains in Skyrim and go up them. You can see these places across the bay in Fallout 4, go to them. You can scrap things, you can build settlements. There is a lot going on, and I think we can safely assume that Bethesda is just going to be adding more and more and more, and that is awesome. And yes, there are 2 new RPGs coming out before the Elder Scrolls 6 or Fallout 5, but those could be incredibly exciting as well. There is no day that Bethesda is going to release an open world RPG that I'm going to go, oh, well, that's not very interesting. You know, personally, I think it's going to be a sci-fi kind of starship game, one of them, and maybe the other one will be kind of a contemporary RPG, maybe even pre-war Fallout 4, or just kind of contemporary. So basically our time frame, our time reference of weapons and technology. The reason I think that one of them will be a sci-fi game is because in the very first Elder Scrolls Arena, there was a designer note in the manual, and they talked about wanting to build an RPG where you would be a starship captain and go and do things that starship captains do. And it's possible that they've just now come to the point where they have the money and the manpower to create that, and I would find that incredibly exciting. It's also possible that they took a look at the Star Citizen crowdfunding page and realized, you know what, there are quite a few people who are willing to spend money on this whole sci-fi thing. Maybe now is the time. As for why I think the other one will be contemporary or pre-war Fallout 4, I think there were quite a significant amount of pre-war assets made for Fallout 4, and we didn't see them. I honestly expected a DLC for Fallout 4 that took us back into the pre-war. From a storytelling point of view, there is almost no reason to have the sole survivor be a pre-war character unless you intended to flesh out that pre-war world. But I think it's just possible that Bethesda got so much interest in the pre-war world that they decided, you know what, maybe we should spin this off. Now they have said that these 2 new RPGs are going to be 2 entirely new IPs. Whether or not that is a bit of verbal legerdemain and they consider the pre-war Fallout world a different IP than the post-war Fallout world, well, I don't know the answer to that. What I do know is that I actually am truly excited that there are 2 new Bethesda RPGs on the way, even if it means I have to wait a little bit for the Elder Scrolls 6. And like I said, I've been waiting on the Elder Scrolls for a very, very long time. And all I can tell you is, generally, it's worth the wait. So, if you're concerned about what we've seen at this year's presentation, try just to remember that it takes time. They are building worlds. They are not just cranking out cookie cutter games. So have faith and have patience, and you know, there are still a world of older games if you haven't tried out Arena or Daggerfall or Morrowind in the older Elder Scrolls, and Fallout 3, Fallout New Vegas. There are still, and of course the original Fallouts are available as well. There are a lot of things to keep us busy in the meantime, and we will see what else E3 of 2017 drops on us. I'm sure we'll get some more information, as well as the folks from Bethesda do more interviews with the larger gaming networks and programs at E3, so one way or another we'll probably hear some more, but I would not expect any major announcements, and I would expect a considerable wait before we get back to new versions of what we love. On the plus side, we still have Skyrim and Fallout 4 and all of the older games, and they're really a lot of fun. Okay, so that is my take on Bethesda's E3, pre-E3 presentation, the BE3 presentation. I would like to point out that if you look in the upper right-hand corner, you will see a small letter I with a white circle around it. These are the cards I mentioned earlier, and links to other videos that I've made. Also, I have a Twitter link in the description of the video and on my channel's main page. If you're on mobile, it'll be on my channel's About page. I would like to thank you guys for being the best community out there. Truly, you guys are awesome, and you make this an absolute joy to do, and I really, truly want to thank you for that. I would also like to thank you for watching. I hope you found the video entertaining and maybe just a little informative. I would like to invite you to subscribe, like, and share if you so desire, and to ask you, above all, to please take care.